Well, I grew up in a home where there was a lot of heartache. There were often fights, and one person was always not speaking to another person. Or uncles and aunts that didn't communicate, and so on and so forth. You kind of get the story. And I was a pretty sensitive kid, so I would hide it all. And of course, like lots of boys who become men, became very good at keeping my emotions to myself. Then there's this transition point as a teenager. And some of you, many of you have heard some of this before, this part of the story. There was a transition point when I was at a camp. And I was 15 years old when my father died. So I was at Kutz Camp, our youth movement's camp for kids active in youth group back in the day. And I went there kind of shy, keeping to myself. My father died while I was there. And folks who were nice to this shy kid from Long Island who talked a lot like Tony Danza. These people drew close. My counselors, college kids, students, literally carried me, my arms around their shoulders, from the director's office to this outdoor theater, our Teatron, that was sitting on a lake. And that's where we had Shabbat services because he died just as Shabbat was coming. And I sat there, and the whole camp already knew about my sudden loss, and they surrounded me. I knew the word Gemilut Chassidim because it's in prayers and songs, and if you're sent to religious school, then I heard about it. But it didn't really make sense. It was just something that we're taught. It wasn't until that Friday night service that I truly understood what an act of chesed is. So what's chesed? Most of us translate it as kindness. I think it's more than that. I think chesed is God's unequivocal love that is showered upon us. That, in turn, is the model for us to shower love upon others. Chesed is a quality where there is a commitment to one another because we are in a sacred relationship. And there are even taught parts of the Torah where chesed is translated best as loyalty. There is this mutual responsibility that chesed brings to us. It's from our sacred relationship, our brit, our covenant, our promise to one another, and our promise to God. And that's why I share so regularly why I believe that showing up is a Jewish value. Showing up. When my father died, my parents' friends disappeared. They didn't know how to connect to my mother. So she not only lost her husband, she lost a friend group. So when we experienced here in Colorado recently the loneliness of COVID, those memories and feelings returned to me. And I tried to become adept at facilitating Zoom encounters from my home office. Aside from creating opportunities for people to have a connection or a touch point every single day, every day we were online, we would do something that I originally thought was just kind of silly, and I was looking for a laugh. But it turned out to be a great source of joy and comfort. During some of the longer songs, while our cantorial soloist at the time, Holly Berman, who's now in Emerita with us, she would be singing, and I would spotlight people's screens so that our folks would be able to see one another, and they would smile, and they would dance. Some shook a tambourine. I know who you are. Only once was somebody only dressed on the top but not the bottom. But I realized from spotlighting that screen and have people do a silly wave, there was this moment of connection and comfort. And it was around that time that I started bringing to you, this congregation, this message of belonging. And at first I was like, should this be the main message I'm putting behind everything? Shouldn't it be Torah, God? But I also know that there are so many who have questions about all of those things. So my approach to belonging is to open up a door for these other Jewish experiences, like Jewish learning and Torah and spirituality and God, and finding lots of ways to experience it. And that message of belonging became really clear to me because I attended a radical and subversive training focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And at Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. And there I learned with Dr. Nicholas Pierce, a scholar, an entrepreneur, a pastor, and a professor at the Kellogg School of Management. And I began to understand that every place, every location has an element of diversity. And diversity is having a seat at the table. Inclusion, which we have been talking a lot about, is being heard at the table. But belonging is about the embrace of our authentic voices at the table. It's our ability to share our truths, to engage in building a brave space where we can be seen, heard, and recognized for who we are. It is where our authentic voices are embraced. I went deeper and deeper into the structure of belonging for our synagogue and working with another Jewish nonprofit, a group called Klal, focusing on Jewish pluralism. And we began to use a framework that they designed for people to feel noticed, named, known, and needed. I see some of you are practicing the mantra. And this resonated so deeply with me that I pivoted sharply and helped these terms be a guide for our work. So in a recent webinar hosted by our partners at Jewish Disability Advocates and Jewish Family Services of Colorado, where even our own consultant and congregant, Erica, facilitated a conversation with organizations that advocate for inclusion of people with disabilities in the Jewish community, one of the speakers was my wife, and my wife, Deborah. My wife is my best friend, and she's somebody who keeps me honest. And while I have lots of accolades for her as my wife and the mother of our daughters, and she's a pretty good teacher here as well in our programs, she's also, sadly, a survivor of suicide loss. And 2 months before we moved to Colorado, her father died by suicide. And since that time, 10 years ago, she has written and advocated a lot about suicide prevention and postvention. We might not be familiar with the term postvention. It's the response in the aftermath of a suicide to promote healing and mitigate the negative effects of exposure to suicide. So Deborah spoke on a panel, and I share this because as she was preparing for her presentation about living as a suicide loss survivor, she referred to this framework during her talk that we use all of the time here, where we want people to be noticed, named, known, and needed. And in her talk, she thought that there should be something else, that something was missing. Naturally, she doesn't tell me first. She announces this on this webinar. So typical. But she was right, also kind of typical. She wanted to add the word nurtured. Nurtured. Noticed, named, known, that throws you off because it's a K, I get it, needed, and nurtured. And I kind of thought it was brilliant. It makes sense. And she's smarter than I am. And that is what we need to feel like we can call a place home. It doesn't mean we need to agree with one another. We don't. It means we care for one another all the while. In conversations with someone on our staff, Carly Atwell, who is a longtime congregant, grew up here, raised her kids here, and now is our director of lifelong learning, we were exploring the context of these words. Notice named, known, needed, and now the possibility of adding nurtured. It doesn't work if only one needs to receive these things. It doesn't work if we only take. It only works if there are others that we are in covenant with who are able and willing to provide it. So for our synagogue to be a community of belonging, we need to be generous of spirit and help others feel that way. If more of us are able to do that, then all of us can feel home and seen and known and needed. And that's a sacred covenant. Rabbi Alexander Schindler, a remarkable human being in my book, who served as president of what was then called the Union of American Hebrew Congregations until his death in 2000, he wrote something so powerful, I've held on to it for all these decades. He wanted to illustrate the power of a caring community. And Rabbi Schindler wrote, "Our lives are a wilderness, uncharted and unpredictable, untimely deaths, unexpected blows, unsuitable matches, unfulfilled dreams. And yet by gathering our heartaches into a house of worship, we find something transformative happening. Our sorrows become windows of compassion." They became windows of compassion, paths through the wilderness, hewed and marked by past generations, giving us our bearings. Patterns of meaning and significance emerge. We are moved from self-pity to love. Our individual heartbeats merge with the pulse of all humankind. Suddenly, we no longer tremble like an uprooted reed. None of us, not a single one of us, is immune from life struggles. But Rabbi David Wolpe observes in his book, Making Loss Matter, that we can be uplifted and strengthened by bringing meaning to our lives. And one of the ways we do that is to share some of the love that we received when we felt empty, when we had a hole due to a loss, and share some of the love that we received with others. It isn't easy. Rabbi Wolpe even says it's courageous. But in a dramatically fast-paced, complicated world, the need for community has never been greater, and lots of studies show we are in far and far and far less communities. We might be in clubs, maybe we have a few friends, but that sense of being engaged in community seems to be shrinking. In my last congregation, like this one, I worked with our lay leaders and volunteers to organize a caring community. I really don't want to call it a committee. A committee is a group of people with hierarchy and meetings. A community was a group of people who are interested in strengthening a covenant, a sacred relationship that's going to build a shared responsibility for one another. And this new caring community, renewed caring community in our community, is organizing to help people when they need us. And we have the same thing here, led by Elise Kitt and Molly Bayer and Elisa Greenberg. We have people prepared on their teams to visit someone who's homebound or ill, others who will send a caring note. Some are ready to set up a meal train. and others who just need a meal or two, and we have a freezer full of them. In my last congregation, though, there was one woman who helped to organize this kind of an effort, and I asked her to launch this with me, and I was surprised that she said yes. Why'd you laugh? She said, I will do this because our kids need to see us do great things. Our kids need to see us do great things. And that's never left me. Friends, it's time for our kids to see us do great things. And I'm not talking about biological children. I'm talking about people of all ages who are watching us, because somebody is always watching. How we spend our precious time. How do we choose to model what's really important? Years ago, the Jewish community was organized around the needs of the poor immigrant Jews arriving to this country with hope for a better tomorrow. And the tomorrow largely has happened. That doesn't mean there isn't poverty in the Jewish community. There is, and there's lots of ways that we can still do our part. But my colleague, Rabbi Julia Appel from Klal, shared a new agenda. She says this: we now face a different scarcity, more widespread, and dire all the same, a scarcity of companionship and loving care. She says what we need is a sweeping revival of the lost art of Jewish caretaking. The key is in needing our people more, she says. We must stop doing everything for our congregants and community members and instead spend our time creating pathways for their individualized, intentional involvement. We must focus not on what congregants are owed in exchange for membership, but on what we owe each other as Jews and as human beings. In this new year, one where people are so divided, when we are hurting and unsure of what community means and what Jewish community has to offer, can we strengthen our unity without demanding uniformity? Can we see each other's humanity without demanding agreement? We will talk about the hard issues of these days on Yom Kippur, I'm sure. But I'm intentionally creating a sacred space of what's important to us in this sacred community. So I want to conclude with a poem from Rabbi Hannah Yerushalmi. She writes, the rabbis teach there is an angel bending over every single blade of grass, whispering calmly, grow, grow. And so the grass grows, making gray land lush green, drinking in the autumn rain soft beneath the toddler's feet, in neighborhoods and sidewalk cracks. In recent days, the rabbis explain a new and necessary role for them. Now there is an angel standing by each of us, reaching into every soul, finding seeds of empathy, speaking sternly, time is short, grow, grow. And so we wait and wait for this empathy to multiply, for hands to touch hands and hearts to connect hearts in neighborhoods and sidewalk chats. In this new year, may our empathy grow. May we find our ways to stand shoulder to shoulder with our humans. May this community continue to build its belonging so we can encounter a living Torah to navigate a challenging world. May it be a good year and a sweet year of good health where hostages are released and peace prevails for all.